On this episode of China Unscripted, the Chinese Communist Party has launched a global war while America slept. But hope is on the horizon. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And joining us today is Professor Kerry Gershaneck from National Chengchi University in Taipei, China Province, Taiwan.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Chris, Shelley, and Matt. Thank you
Thanks.
for inviting me.
I just wanted to make sure YouTube wouldn't demonetize us.
No, it's a fashionable sport these days. But I'm like Australia, who's a wine. I'm telling people to buy. I'm telling people to support China Unscripted and China Uncensored. So
I
I'm with you,
appreciate
buddy.
that. And you can also enjoy the show with a glass of Australian wine and lobster.
Good
Preferably not a glass of lobster.
I was thinking that, but I was going to say it.
I was also thinking that.
All right. Well, so anyways, let's get into it. Your new book, Political Warfare: Strategies for Combating China's Plan to Win Without Fighting. How does a country win without fighting?
You don't get taken over by a fascist, totalitarian, brutally repressive regime like the one that we have run by the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing. That's how you win. You fight to survive initially, which is the phase we're in right now. And then you take the war back to the Chinese Communist Party. And when I say take the war back to them, I mean we fight the same way they fight. If you don't, you're going to lose.
Well, I think the issue is a lot of people don't even realize, like they're hearing you say, we're at war with China. They don't even know what that means.
China's at war with us. China says they're at war with us. About 20 years ago, there was a guy who was running around in Southwest Asia with a towel on his head, and he kept telling America, I'm at war with you. I'm at war with you. I'm going to kill you. And all of our elites, all of our political leaders and our policymakers are all sort of laughing and saying, there, go run along, little boy. You're not a real threat to us. We're America. And then we had planes slam into the World Trade Center, into the Pentagon, and crash to the fields of Pennsylvania. And we lost about, 2,000, how many Americans dying fairly hideous deaths that day. And we found out, no kidding, Osama bin Laden, you are at war with us. And we just refused to recognize it until we lost a massive number of Americans. So what we have to do, as you're getting to, Chris, is we have to understand the terminology and the mindset that they have towards us, which is they're at war with us. And we have to accept that. We have to use their terminology. And then we have to make policy and conduct operations based on that revised mindset. It's not peacetime anymore. They're at war with us. We have to go to war with them.
And so is that what political warfare is? That it's not troops on the ground or slamming planes into buildings. It's political warfare.
Well, it could be slamming planes into buildings. It's terrorism. That's part of it. It's everything in the Chinese mindset, that is the Chinese Communist Party mindset, I'll say, is always framed in war. It goes back to their warring, the warring states era. But everything is framed in terms of warfare. You have political warfare. You have the three warfares, which is psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare or lawfare. There's a whole plethora of other terms that they use, but it all is couched in terms of combat, of war. And the end state is to either make your enemy a vassal state or just completely destroy the enemy. So yes, we have to use the terminology. So conceptually, we can respond to the war that's being waged against us. This is hard for Americans. This is hard for good people. We're normally incapable, by virtue of our upbringing, our religious values, and other things that mold us, we're incapable of comprehending the war that China's waging against our countries and against democracies globally. We're unable to discern the dishonesty. We're unable to see through the deception. We're unable to fathom the venality of this regime. We don't understand the existential threat that it poses to us. And Yeah. So what you're getting at a very good point. Most people don't realize that there's a country as powerful as the People's Republic of China that's at war with us and is bent on destroying us, displacing us as the world's greatest power, and then displacing democracy, human rights, all those rule of law, everything that we value, the principles that go back to before the Magna Carta, and all of those other documents, those other milestones in the development of the democratic mindset, where we value human rights, we value the individual. We are citizens. We are not subjects. That mindset does not exist in the Chinese Communist Party. And it's hard for Americans, because we mirror image. It's hard for Americans to understand what we're up against.
Right. I mean, I can't fathom this idea that, like, come on, the Chinese military is going to send planes into American buildings. Like, that's not even on the table, right?
Absolutely, it is. And here's why. Get back to what I said earlier, Matt, about everything is couched in warfare. Well, there's another warfare that really has shaped the thought of the leadership and the Politburo and the military. And that's the concept of unrestricted warfare. A couple of People's Liberation Air Force, then senior colonels, brigadier general equivalents in America, wrote a book back in around 1999. They had it published, in which they called for China to implement unrestricted warfare against America, against its enemies. Unrestricted warfare means we're at war all the time, means everything is on the table. Information warfare, which is a large part of political warfare, is on the table. Assassination is on the table. Terrorism is on the table. It's unrestricted warfare. You do everything you need to do, manipulate the media, lie, cheat, steal. You do everything you need to do to undermine your enemy, deceive your enemy, bring your enemy down, so you become, or China becomes, the hegemon. So yes, planes slamming into buildings, absolutely. Biological warfare is one of the tools that these two colonels called for. And let me reinforce the impact that has had. That book, it may not have the standing of some of the doctrinal, or what passes as doctrinal publications in the People's Liberation Army, and what impacts the thinking of the Politburo. But understand that these two colonels were promoted. They were rock stars. They were heroes in China at the time. When 9/11 occurred in 2001, there was a massive propaganda campaign to make America think that, oh, these two colonels, they're on the fringe of thinking here in China. That was massive propaganda campaign. Mike Pillsbury goes into that in great detail. He was in the middle of that in his book, The 100-Year Marathon. He goes into great detail how, with the help of American enablers, those who basically support the Chinese Communist Party and what they say and they do, they pretty much convinced American officials that that those two colonels in that book has no impact. But the reality is, it was all propaganda, that they really have taken unrestricted warfare to heart.
Well, so you've talked about this military strategy that has on the table terrorism, biological warfare, but we haven't seen any of that yet. What has the Chinese Communist Party been doing? How have they been fighting this war?
Goes back to the traditional political warfare, which again entails media, control of the media, their state-controlled media. They can. It's not just their state-controlled media we need to be concerned about. It's all the media they take over, or they co-opt, or they influence through other ways. And we'll go into more detail on that later. It's their lawfare. It's all the lawsuits they bring to stop the U.S. military from doing the training it needs to do, from building the facilities it needs to do. These are simple examples. Lawfare, as in ignoring the tribunal, the ruling on the South China Sea, and manipulating scholars, legal scholars, or so-called legal scholars, to support China's position, which has been deemed illegal internationally, but through lawfare, they confuse people about the ruling and they ignore it anyway. Lawfare, in other ways, creating artificial islands and make them an artificial part of the People's Republic of China, and by passing laws, okay, through psychological operations such as against Taiwan, the massive circumnavigation by their PLA Air Force aircraft, the constant live fire, amphibious assault exercises, all the military intimidation, all the threats on a daily basis in China daily, PLA daily, on the radio, and the pro-CCP media in Taiwan, always psychologically wearing down, demoralizing, and dividing Taiwan. And that applies to all the other democracies as well, but Taiwan's a premier example. This is how, on a daily basis, globally, these are just minor examples of how the Chinese Communist Party is conducting political warfare globally, kidnapping book publishers, having foreign police forces pick up people, even though they violated no law in the country where they are, under pressure from the PRC, they will pick up dissidents or other people that China wants apprehended. Again, this is all part of political warfare, coercion, proxy armies. Most people don't know this, but China did not give up supporting revolutionary armies after the Cold War. Starting in 1949, 1950, they supported the invasion of South Korea. They supported the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese in Vietnam, and revolutionary armies from Southeast Asia down to Africa, down to Central America and South America. Most people assume that all stopped at the end of the Cold War. Absolutely not. The largest non-state military force in Asia and arguably the world, and the largest and best equipped and best trained, is the United Lost State Army. It is a Chinese proxy army that holds a territory the size of Belgium just inside the border of Myanmar on the border with China. This proxy army dictates to the government of Myanmar what it can do and what it cannot do. So these are many of the ways that China conducts political warfare globally.
So it sounds like it's not just targeted at the United States, but geared towards making the Chinese Communist Party the dominant superpower globally.
Yes and yes, but let me clarify a little bit. Taiwan's the next target. They've taken Hong Kong. The world opinion be damned. Hong Kong's ours now. We will, the hell with that agreement with London. It's ours. Okay, so Taiwan's next on the hit parade. But America is the number one. They're number one enemy. It's the main threat. We're the hegemon. And again, go back to the Warring States. There's, when you read my book, which I highly recommend, you'll see how. Yeah, thank you so much. Here, I'll toast you in that. I do not have a China Unscripted mug, but I will use this one to toast you for that.
That's Australian wine, right?
It is Australian tea in a Taiwan Marine Corps mug. So some reply to my Taiwan Marine and all my Marine buddies around the world.
It's a revolutionary drink.
It is indeed. Again, Taiwan's next on the hit parade, of course, but it's always America. They have to dethrone America. They have to split our alliances. They have to make sure that we have no credibility. And we do things, our policymakers, our elected officials have done some things that greatly aided the Chinese Communist Party in achieving all these objectives. But the most important goal they have, the most important immediate goal, take Taiwan. Most important long-term goal, unseat America. Not just unseat us, not just say, okay, we're number one, America's number two. It's make America so it's basically neutered, it's ineffectual. And it's seen as that by the world. With the Chinese Communist Party, it's not just enough to get stronger than your enemy. You have to defeat your enemy. You have to make sure it is seen that your enemy is subjugated.
A question about that. One of the criticisms that came up in the presidential campaign this year was that though Trump was tough on China, he has alienated U.S. allies, that he's done that, make America seem bad internationally. And the argument was that Biden would work with multilateral alliances to counter China. What do you think about that argument?
I think it's shallow. I think it ignores anything that happened before January 20th, 2017. You want to look at effective alliance splitting. There's a guy named Xi Jinping who is now in his position. Yeah. Mr. Xi was in charge of the Scarborough Shoal Small Leading Group, which most people probably have never heard of Scarborough Shoal, nor what a small leading group is. So let me explain how that is significant today and in terms of alliances. Scarborough Shoal is claimed by several countries, but it's basically been administered by the Philippines within the Philippines EEZ, and it's always been considered by the U.S. as part of the Philippines. America has a treaty, a mutual defense treaty with the Republic of the Philippines. Yet, when the small leading group in Beijing, led by Xi Jinping, who was not in his current position at the time, this was in early 2012, when the small leading group sent in the Navy ships and Coast Guard ships to basically take it and contest it from the one Filipino Navy ship that was there, rusty old ship, our State Department stepped in and said, let's broker a deal. Let's broker a deal. You know, we're America. We do that. We broker deals. So we got an agreement by both Beijing and Manila to back off. Immediately after Manila pulled its force out, very small force out, China ignored the deal, just like Hong Kong. And there's a pattern here, gang. Just like Hong Kong, and they went in and they took the island. Now they're militarizing the island, just like they are their artificial islands they built in the South China Sea. So, okay, what's the broader impact of that? Because Kurt Campbell, who was Assistant Secretary of State at the time, sort of gaffed it off, even after President Aquino from the Philippines flew to Washington, D.C. to beseech President Obama for assistance under the Mutual Defense Treaty. It's sovereign territory of the Republic of Philippines. China's taken it. Mr. Obama, President Obama, please help us under the Mutual Defense Treaty. Got ignored. Okay, so Kurt Campbell, I heard him personally say when he was visiting the think tank I was at in Hawaii, yeah, it's just a pile of rocks. We're not going to go to war. Americans aren't going to go to war for a pile of rocks. Well, here's the broader ramifications, Kurt Campbell, and the broader ramifications are that Thailand, where I taught for 6 years, and a number of institutions to include Thammasat, and the Naval Academy and the Military Academy, the Army Academy, our treaty ally, Thailand, watched that. The whole world watched that, what was happening, that America did not back our treaty ally in a blatant, just gangster type grab of territory, sovereign territory of the Philippines. We did nothing. We would not support our ally. So that was a major milestone in the thinking of Thailand, where we need to bend a lot more towards Beijing. We can't rely on our treaty ally, America. South Korea saw that. Other countries around the world saw that, and they were not enchanted that America showed such weakness. So when you look at things that split alliances, there was our failure to effectively back the Republic of Korea, South Korea, when the Beijing put intense economic pressure, intense political pressure on them, because we asked South Korea to put in radars and anti-ballistic missile system in South Korea. And then we left them pretty much just hanging there to withstand the brutal assault from China that beat them down. Again, South Korea is saying, America, come on, little backup here. And we didn't give it to them. So this goes back prior to President Trump. It goes back to the Obama-Biden administration. And there are other things that go back a lot further because we've had at least 3 decades of accommodation and arguably appeasement of the People's Republic of China. But it's these things you asked about alliances and those things that are perceived as alliance busting. Since then, in recent years, you'll see that we have the Quad that is now really coming together nicely. It's India, Australia, Japan, and the United States. And we're now building, it's not going to be NATO, it's not going to be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but we're building a united front, to use Chinese Communist Party terminology. We're building united fronts around the world of other nations willing to stand up. Look at Australia, 25 million people. That's all. Standing up to a totalitarian regime that has 1.3 or 1.4 billion subjects, depending on how you do the math. But they're subjects, they're not citizens. But Australia, which not that long ago was basically in a complete accommodationist mode, is standing up to the Chinese Communist Party now. Why? Because it knows, or it has known for at least 3.5 years to 4 years, that America's got its back. I can give other examples of that, other countries that have been standing up. India, of course, they got attacked again by China. Chinese trying to take their territory, but India is standing up. Other countries are standing up because they think America's going to back them. So no, I wouldn't say that assessment is entirely correct. Yes, Donald J. Trump has alienated allies, but what did that amount to? Telling NATO, you got to pay your fair share. Telling other countries, South Korea, Japan, you got to pay your fair share. I've served in those countries. I know what we invest from the United States. I think Mr. Trump is right. I wouldn't have done it in the same manner he did, but I would have done the same thing that he has done.
You know, it's interesting when you mention the Scarborough Shoal incident or what happened in South Korea with the THAAD missiles, that system that then you can very clearly see these countries, both the Philippines and South Korea, and you mentioned Thailand watching this whole situation happen, then turn towards the Chinese Communist Party. And so how important is, America's involvement in this around the world?
What would have happened during the Cold War if America hadn't led, and had led with strength, not led from behind or led from weakness? If America hadn't been forceful and strong, militarily powerful, politically powerful, and economically powerful, we'd all be speaking Russian now. It's the same thing now, except that the threat from the People's Republic of China, I would argue, is exponentially bigger than it was from the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Yes, USSR had a large number of intercontinental ballistic missiles with nukes on the, MIRV warheads, other types of warheads. That's dangerous, of course. But they never had the political warfare capability that the PRC has. China is going to win in their minds by not having to fire a shot. That's where political warfare comes in. They're going to bribe, coerce, blackmail, co-opt in whatever ways they can the elite of the different countries around the world, starting with the United States of America. And they're going to get us to comply with what they want, to acquiesce. And that way they don't need to go kinetic. That way, they're struggling. There's a struggle there. It's not winning peacefully entirely. There's, again, a struggle involved, but it's not a kinetic warfare. It does not rise to the level of open, conventional, or worse, nuclear war.
It's interesting you put it that way, because I was thinking, as you're talking about Hong Kong, when we were in Hong Kong last year, there was some talk going around, are they going to send in the People's Liberation Army? Are they going to send in tanks? And there were all these rumors. But ultimately what happened is the CCP used legal warfare. They passed a national security law in Beijing.
Right.
Then they said that applied to Hong Kong. They said that the treaty with the UK no longer applied, and now they're using legal means in Hong Kong to go after the people they consider enemies of the state. People like Jimmy Lai, the CEO of Apple Daily, people like Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, who are the activists, and putting them in prison. Ivan Lam. So all these people are being targeted through legal means, but it's legal means from the CCP's framework. And so actually it's really interesting to see in a very, very real way how now, 8 million people in Hong Kong have been oppressed without firing a shot, except obviously the tear gas, but using this lawfare, as you put it.
Yes, and the rumors you were talking about weren't necessarily uncertain, unsure people of Hong Kong speculating on what might happen. That was part of the strategic psychological warfare, that third pillar of the three warfares. Those rumors were intentional. They were designed to instill fear. Always keep your enemy fearful, not knowing, guessing what's going on, and wear them down that way. And then when you don't go in with the tanks that you started the rumor that you were going to do, then there's almost a sigh of relief that, oh, they took us over without doing that. Again, none of this is coincidental. They have a lot of smart people, as you pointed out in your previous programs. They're very intelligent people there. They're just using that intelligence for malign purposes. And yes, they used lawfare, rule by law, as opposed to rule of law, to take over Hong Kong. And that's what they'll continue to do as they continue to press Taiwan. Well, you're part of our sovereign territory. So that middle line that used to exist halfway across the strait, that doesn't exist anymore, because you're our sovereign territory. So we can fly our planes over Jade Mountain. We can fly our planes over you, and you can't do anything. You can't shoot us down. That's where they want to eventually continue to push psychologically the people of Hong Kong to the point where, not Hong Kong, Taiwan, they're next. So they want to create confusion by doing activities like that.
So in your book, you talk about how Taiwan and Thailand are two prime examples of the Communist Party's political warfare. Can you tell us a little bit about why that is, what's going on in these countries?
Let's start with Thailand. Thailand was designated early on by Beijing as its number one country, the cornerstone of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to win over. One, geographically, it's important. It was strong in a lot of ways, and it was a treaty ally of the United States, one of 5 that we have in the Asia Pacific region. Historically, there's long roots that I go into in the book, so there's 2 chapters on that. One goes through the history, and then of the political warfare and the relationship between China, or what was even before China had a name, with what was Siam and the countries that existed in that territory before Thailand was officially named. Okay, so with all that history behind it, then we come up to present day, where that is the prize in Southeast Asia. If they could win Thailand, then Thailand will influence all the other countries of Southeast Asia, which is vitally important for so many reasons to China, to just, again, become essentially vassal states to the Middle Kingdom once again. So that's why they targeted Thailand. The book goes into extensive detail how they've done that. They basically control much of its media. They don't own it. It's not part of Xinhua. It's not part of China Daily. It's not part of CGTV. But basically, they provide the content that so much of Thailand's media runs on social media, on the newspapers, on TV, and on radio. They have immense influence through media warfare there. They have immense influence through the Confucius Institutes. Confucius Institutes in Thailand, there's more there than all of Southeast Asia combined. So you can see what the Schwerpunkt, the priority of effort by Beijing is Thailand, to infiltrate academia, which they've done very well, to influence through the Confucius Institutes, through cultural centers, through elite capture. The Sino-Thais now are one of the most important forces in the country. And basically on the elected governments that they've had, the last two the last two prime ministers were Sino-Thais, and one of them boasted that he had more Chinese in his cabinet than he had Thais in his cabinet. So this is the way that they've created influence in the country, and they've helped to lure the country to bend towards Beijing. America has helped, and my book goes into great detail. We've not had the best ambassadors there. We've not done the best job working with our longtime ally. When they wanted us to work with them, we gaffed them off in cases where we should not have. And especially after the 2014 coup, we badly mishandled that. And so they had an option. They could go north, and they leaned heavily towards Beijing. Their expression is that we're bamboo, we bend with the wind. And right now, the strongest wind is coming from the north. One day it may come from the west, from America again. But right now, the strongest wind is coming from the north, from Beijing, and we're bending with that.
I kind of want to wrap this into what you'd mentioned about the Philippines and Korea, because interestingly, like after the Scarborough Shoal incidents, where the Philippines felt very disappointed in the U.S., the next president after Benigno Aquino was Rodrigo Duterte, who ran and won in 2016 on a very anti-American platform. Well,
he also had kind of an anti-China platform at the time.
He claimed he was going to ride a jet ski to the Scarborough Shoal and whatever. But of course, he ended up almost immediately, meeting with Xi Jinping and trying to become an ally of China and develop that relationship at the expense of the U.S. relationship.
The southernmost province of China, I think, to use Duterte's words.
Yes.
Yeah, and then the Philippines, South Korea similarly, because you had Park, who was ousted. And Chris and I were there in 2016. And in general, I think there was a pro-American sentiment, but it was, there was still a controversy over THAAD. After that issue, Park was ousted, and then Moon Jae-in, who is very anti-American and very pro-ties with China, was elected. And now his party is almost in complete power. And so it's interesting how, like, those moves by the U.S., it wasn't just like an isolated thing, but it actually completely shifted the whole political landscape of South Korea and the Philippines for many years to come in a way that was pro-CCP and anti-American.
Thanks, Obama.
It's more complicated than that, but yes.
Yes, I mean, and you just named three of those highly touted treaty allies, Matt. The five allies: South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, Japan, and Australia. So whereas our officials, our generals, our admirals, we thump our chests and go around and say, oh yeah, we got five treaty allies in Asia. No, you don't. Not anymore. At best, you have around 2.5. And Australia is iffy. I mean, right now they've got backbone. Right now they're standing up, and God bless them, because the right people are in charge. But let's look at elections. Let's go back to Mr. Moon. Let's go back to that last election, Matt, that you were talking about. There's a lot of evidence that there was foreign interference, something we've not heard in America. Those things don't happen in our country. There's a lot of evidence. There's a fellow named Grant Newsham who did a good study, but there's other studies that have been done as well about what exactly happened in this last election that gave Moon the legislature, which he did not have before. He couldn't ram through all of his pro-PRC policies and anti-American policies. because the legislature was blocking him. Well, miraculously, a lot of inexplicable vote outcomes, things that would not logically have happened, which Mr. Newsham goes into great detail explaining, they did occur. Anomalies. The electronic voting system somehow appears to have been corrupted. A lot of things happened. So Australia, campaign interference works and election interference works. So right now, Australia is on the right path. It is doing the noble thing. But when I say we have 2.5 allies, America has 2.5 allies in the region at this point. Again, we have to be careful. We need to rebuild those alliances. And the destruction of those alliances didn't begin on January 20th, 2017.
What is happening in Thailand right now? Is it basically just completely, subjugated by the Chinese Communist Party? Is there like any realization of what's happened to them?
The influence is immense in the PRC influence in all branches of the government, all aspects of the government is pretty strong, and in the media is strong. Culturally, it's strong. But no, it's not a done deal for China. There are still elements in Thailand who understand what's happening to their country. That if they allow the China model to become fully, taken in by their government, their children will never have rights. They'll be subjects. So there's a lot of good people in government, a lot of good citizens who understand what is happening. You see pushback against PRC bullying, the 50-cent army, the strategic support force of about 300,000 PLA soldiers who go online to attack critics of China and influence and psyop people around the world online. You see the milk tea alliance here between Thais, good Thais standing up and working with good people from Hong Kong and working with good people from Taiwan and pushing back against the cyber bullies who they know full well this isn't Joe and Jane Nettison operating out of their home after they had a little bit too much gin at night and figure, let's go harass the Thais. They know this is government sponsored. So they realize they're taking on, I know some of these people, they realize they're taking on the government of the People's Republic of China when they fight back online against them. There's a good effort that started being made several years ago by the US government to recover from the incredibly inept, childlike, frankly, response to the 2014 coup. So there's been, if you took if the meter was here, is halfway between the U.S. over here, People's Republic of China here, for a long time, the meter would have been pro-U.S. After 2014, it went way over to the PRC side. And so now it's coming back because the U.S. is doing a lot of smart things in trying to work with the Thai government, which is a difficult government to work with sometimes.
Well, so it seems like in your book you talk about how there was a lot of deafness in the U.S. government with officials, think tanks, etc., about the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, what the Communist Party was doing. How did U.S. State Department and Defense Department officials react when you were trying to tell them about the Communist Party's political warfare?
Well, it wasn't pretty. We'd lost all of our capacity to conduct political warfare effectively 30 years ago. And here's why. We won the Cold War. And because we won the Cold War, Chris, we were at the end of history. We were never going to fight a competitor again. We never had to worry about an ideological competitor or a military competitor. We were at the end of history. We were blatantly naive. It was stunning, the horrendous decisions we made at that time. We shut down the U.S. Information Agency, which it had become. There was reasons that it was shut down, but basically we shut down one of our major tools in fighting political warfare and teaching American policymakers and bureaucrats about political warfare and the American people. After the end of the Cold War, it got rotten because it lost its sense of purpose, so Congress shut it down. Nothing took its place. We stopped teaching it in our university, our feeder Georgetown University, I like to use as an example because I never met any Georgetown MA that actually understood what political warfare was. They don't get taught that. It's just not on the agenda. Academics in academia, you don't make any points. You don't get invited to conferences. You don't get a visa to the PRC if you focus on the PRC's political warfare. So why go down that route? Why even teach it? So they don't. Our military academies don't teach it. Our war colleges, or the higher level, the colonels, the generals, don't teach it, or hadn't until the past several years. We forgot it starting around 1991. We lost the curriculum. We lost the ability of our leaders to even recognize it. For a long time, the Army, for example, was focused on Russia. Then we had 20 years of the global war on terror. So we've had officers in the U.S. military who are now admirals and generals who have only known Afghanistan, the sandbox. They've known Iraq. They've known that war, counterterrorism, not conventional warfare, and they didn't get much education in the threat of the PRC. Their institutions became pro-PRC, a significant political warfare victory for the liaison department in the PLA and for the United Front was just the co-opting of the Naval Academy, the co-opting of the U.S. Army Academy. Why do I say that? Because they will invite Communist Party members to address all the cadets. Jack Ma, for example. They'll invite the pro-CCP Kevin Rudds to run conferences to influence the senior officers. But for a long time, up until the past couple of years, try to get a Mike Pillsbury in there. Try to get
a Chris Chappell. Can we get a Chris Chappell to the Naval Academy?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Or Matt or Shelley. Any one of you three could have reversed, a 20-year career of ignorance in about an hour. But no, you weren't on the invite list. You probably don't get Christmas cards from the Commandant of the U.S. Military Academy either. I don't either. But the point is, we didn't just ignore teaching of political warfare, what the enemy does and how we fight it, how we fight back. We allowed ourselves to be infiltrated by an accommodationist view. And that, again, is why that's one of the key objectives of PRC political warfare, the United Front. It's a tool. Liaison is the military version of United Front. You go out and you win over people. You get them to believe that China's not a threat. We're your friend. You need us to help deal with North Korea. You need us to help deal with Iran. You need us for the climate change. And so we have policymakers who fall for this. We have United Front admirals and pacifist generals who make horrendously naive and nationally self-destructive policies as a result of the fact that they got hoodwinked by the PRC. We had one vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who came back, went over, got hooked up with some good business deals in Beijing, and became part of the Sanya Initiative, and came back and illegally lobbied Congress to cut off arms sales to Taiwan on behalf of the CCP. That's just one example laid out in the book, and I name names in the book, incidentally, in both State Department and Department of Defense. I mean, you had the acting Assistant Secretary of State for the East Asia and Pacific blocking the FBI and other agencies from arresting armed Chinese intelligence service agents and MSS agents on American soil conducting illegal operations. Don't arrest them. Susan Thornton. Again, you had a lot of people who were co-opted, and that's the goal. That's one of the major goals. It's not just intimidation, but it's co-opting them, it's coercing them, it's bribing them, it's indoctrinating them, intimidating them, it's psychologically manipulating our leaders and the assistants to our leaders. This is all laid out in the book, how they do this.
So in your book, you have a quote that really struck me. It says, "Victory is not a given, nor at this point even in sight. and you say it appears to be inevitable defeat. That's pretty grim. Is there any hope? What can be done?
I don't want you and Shelley and Matt going and turn into gin and quaaludes here at this point, because there's actually
Australian
a good
wine
story here. Australian wine, yes, that's your alternative, and I'll drink to that right now. I don't drink alcohol. This is actually mint tea.
It's not liquefied Australian lobster.
I wish it was
Lobster
on
bisque.
Lobster bisque. But let's go positive here for a change. There is a good news need to be told here. The world understands China better now. Why Hong Kong? We talked about that. They took it in violation of the agreement with England. Even the most naive individual who's tracking this now realizes Beijing cannot be trusted to keep its word.
Does Kirk Campbell think that?
Haven't talked to Kurt in years, and not going out of my way to talk to him now, so I don't know.
All right, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no. The other really important event that's occurred in this year is the Wuhan virus, the COVID-19 disaster that's killed so many Americans. And I think I heard 1.5 billion or 6 million, 1.5 million, 1.6 million people worldwide are dead from it. The Chinese Communist Party lied about it. Now, whether they intentionally released it or not is moot at this point. It's irrelevant. Be nice to know. But the fact is, after they released it, they covered it up. They shut off transport from Wuhan to Beijing. They knew damn well how deadly this was and how serious it was. But at the same time, they're letting tens of thousands of people fly around the world to Italy, to Los Angeles, to Tokyo, to Bangkok, all over the world, to make sure that sharing is caring, that everyone else gets to join in the fun with the coronavirus. So, in everything they did afterward, all their wolf warrior diplomats, and I don't like that term because it gives them too much credit, basically pretty venal people, thugs dressed as diplomats on Twitter and on Facebook and all their social media and all their speeches, blaming the U.S. Army for it, creating all kinds of lies and confusion so people never can figure out the truth of what happened here. Well, China's to blame. And anyone who believes, like our news media tends to quote them on their statistics of how many have died in China, it's nonsense. It's all propaganda, but it's all part of their political warfare to confuse us and to make the world think China's the one country that's recovered. America's still reeling from ineptitude and foolishness, and other countries, you need China for the masks that, oh, by the way, they bought before they told the world that the coronavirus is a threat. They went out and bought up all the masks around the world. You understand all these subplots to this pretty hideous story. So those two reasons alone, what happened in Hong Kong, what happened with COVID-19, have wakened the world. Other reasons to be, I think, optimistic. The world now better understands the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. They now know about the concentration camps. They know about the genocide in Xinjiang. They know, Americans know more now because our government is trying to educate us. One of the recommendations in the book put a lot of emphasis on the education and the public speaking. Those recommendations were provided to our National Security Council back in 2018. So they may seem out of date as recommendations today, but a very important achievement under the Trump administration has been to get Secretary Pompeo speaking about it. There was a great op-ed by DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Radcliffe, about the threat by the PRC and its political warfare yesterday. There's a major effort by Department of Education to educate, Department of Commerce, all these departments that, oh no, we don't get involved in disputes with China. Yes, you do. It's a whole of government approach we need to take, and we're beginning to take that. So that, Shelley and Chris and Matt, those are part of the good news story that go along with the fact that little gutsy Taiwan, country of 23 million people, after being barraged, an incredible election interference campaign backed by, of course, Beijing, but also with pan-red academics and pro-red media in Taiwan and other organizations that were part of the United Front. Taiwan said not just no, but hell no, and overwhelmingly elected President Tsai, re-elected President Tsai, who said, no, we're going to chart our own course, and we're not going to become part of the People's Republic of China. We're not going to let you take us. Australia, I've talked about. There's other examples I could give you, but Australia's standing up. Country of 25 million. They've got the backbone to stand up. So there's a lot of good news. There's a lot of good news at this point that I couldn't say 2 years ago when I first started writing the book. A lot of ignorance in the U.S. government, a lot of unwillingness, inertia, lack of will in the U.S. government to even take on the problem. That's all reversed for now.
I'm glad to hear you say that there's positive news, because I think one of the most infuriating things for me was when I was reading your book, just kind of how you go into the response from the US government, which seemed incredible to me. Like some of the officials who dismissed it or thought that, like, we were being too hard on China and this kind of stuff. Like, reading this like years later from some of those incidents, and you kind of smack your forehead and go, if only there had been some more awareness back then. So, it's good to hear that, you feel that there is, more optimism now. But I also worry about, for example, you said like the coronavirus, people now realize that, the CCP lied about it in the beginning. But now that, their economy is recovering or, they have these vaccines. And what I see in the US media is things like, China is going to be the first to distribute vaccines in Latin America. The Chinese economy is the only economy in the world that's, recovering from the coronavirus. So, that's why American investors should definitely go buy Chinese bonds and invest in the Chinese economy. Like this stuff still really worries me.
Shelley, I guess the best way to say it is we've, like a recovering alcoholic, we've taken the first step and we've recognized we have a problem. And it took a couple of years. I know people on the National Security Council, good friends with one particular one, it's pretty high up. And it just took years. It took a long time just to get our ship of state turned enough to go, at least start going in the right direction. So that's why I say there's reason there for optimism, but this is just the end of the beginning. We've just begun taking the right steps after 3 decades of willful ignorance. The facts were there. We just chose to live in just a Pollyannish a world where, rising China, it's good for us. It's going to be peaceful, and we'll believe them. And don't read too much in that Deng Xiaoping quote about hide your capabilities. Well, till when, Deng? I mean, and then what do you mean? What are you going to do to show those capabilities? What's the outcome? No one bothered to ask the logical follow-on questions to that pretty ominous quote of his that everyone throws around. People, State Department officials I was talking to as late as 2010 were still using that quote. Oh, yeah, they're still in the hide your capabilities mode. No, they're not. No, they're not. You haven't been paying attention. You haven't been tracking, especially Zian Easton said in one of your recent interviews, since 2015, with the People's Liberation Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and their Marine Corps, if you're just tracking the military alone, you would be horrified. But then you go back and you track their media warfare efforts that have really been on the rise since, depends on which initiative you count it from, one in 2004, one in 2009. But that's when they started investing billions in these networks, these platforms that go global, and co-opting news media globally, Africa, South America, Europe, the United States, Canada, all over Asia. All of these massive offensive operations that have been going on on a political warfare and then on a military side, every indicator was there. You had to be consciously inattentive. You had to be making an effort to close your eyes and putting your hands over them, not to see this. But again, we have turned the corner on that, and hopefully we continue to walk down that path and we get better at it. But Chris, if I could, you mentioned the co-option of Wall Street, I guess. When you could have the vice premier of China come in even recently and get people from BlackRock, from Goldman Sachs Group, from JP Morgan, the Business Roundtable, all to come in and chat with him about how they can undermine President Trump's trade war initiatives. And they are willing to work with the vice premier from the People's Republic of China. That tells us some pretty astounding insights on our own business community, our elites who are willing to sell us out to make a buck.
Yeah, that Wall Street Journal article that had, the CEO of BlackRock, praising China lifting people out of poverty in front of Cui Tiankai, the Chinese ambassador, and in front of Henry Kissinger. Like at this, he was receiving an award from some like Chinese U.S. Business Institute. It was just really sickening.
I mean, you're so negative about this, Shelley, but what I realized is China's a great place to invest.
Oh God.
Right. And that's what he was offering them, was they could have new opportunity, all these financial institutions, a new opportunity to expand in China if they'll subvert their own president in pursuit of the dictatorship in Beijing.
So moving forward, what would you like to see happen, not just in the U.S. government, but also from people who might be watching this show right now?
People watching the show, read my book, because you'll get a much better understanding of a very detailed, comprehensive overview of what is this thing that we call political warfare? What is it that is what's the war that's being waged against you to destroy your country, wherever you're from, whether you're United States, whether you're from Denmark, whether you're from Thailand, whether you're, and wherever you're from, they're doing the same thing against your country.
I agree with that, and I'll be putting a link to your book in the description below.
Thank you. So education, self-education is a good start, because your academia has been, I won't say corrupted, but I'll just say there's not, academia is one of the main targets of PRC political warfare. They've done a pretty good job of silencing, getting people to self-censor, getting people to, professors to discourage students from pursuing issues like political warfare. And I've been told a number of times in the US and Taiwan that their advisors for their PhDs or their master's thesis have told them, no, don't go there. Don't go there. You won't get invited to conferences. You'll be ostracized. You won't get a visa to go to the People's Republic of China. Don't do that. So again, don't expect your universities necessarily to assist you in this. It's self-education. It's reading. Okay, but let's take it beyond the individual level. The book does contain universal recommendations. Raise the cost of PRC political warfare in your country. Pass laws like America, or regulations that say, okay, all media, PRC media, you have to declare yourself. Do something like we're doing with the Foreign Agents Registration Act in America. Pass laws that say if you're taking money from the PRC and you're conducting business on their behalf, you have to disclose that. Transparency helps. Sunlight is the great disinfectant in a lot of cases. Shame those organizations that are part of the United Front operation. Get United Front trackers going either on your government or in your think tanks, so you find out, you connect the dots on that, and it's not hard to do. There's it's basic detective work. So it's a complicated issue, but you get started using just basic counterintelligence, analytical procedures, and basic law enforcement. And you can pretty much lay out the mapping fairly quickly. You can get a good map started. Develop a national strategy would be number one, though, for your nations. No nation after the Cold War, no good nation, no free nation kept any of that capacity. America tossed its counter-political warfare capability. Taiwan did. You might be astounded to hear that, but Taiwan, for historical reasons laid out in the book, which are have to do with the KMT government that came in and brutally slaughtered a large number of people in Taiwan after they took control of it in 1945. They don't like the military, and they don't like strong laws over there against subversion and against the type of activities that are conducted in political warfare by the PRC. But now they realize we've got to pass those laws. We've got to pass foreign interference laws. We've got to pass laws that require the media to disclose if they're funded, like if they receive as Want Times Group received $500 million over about 8 years from the People's Republic of China in, quote, subsidies. Well, you've got to disclose that so we know who the PRC is funding and why your editorial content and your news content tracks 99.999% with Xinhua's. Pass laws that protect your Chinese population, your overseas Chinese population. We have a civil rights law in America that can be used effectively by the FBI to go after Chinese consular officials that go in and try to pressure Chinese Student Association members and other overseas Chinese in the United States to spy, to subvert, to attack their professors, to report on their fellow students. Protect the overseas Chinese population in your country through legislation and law enforcement. Set up institutions. Like I recommended in the book and given a very detailed 5-day course, curriculum for a 5-day introductory course to counter-political warfare, but set up centers of excellence for counter-political warfare where you bring in regionally, you bring in other countries facing the same problem. You start building that regional capacity to push back. So again, I recommend you read chapter 9 in my book, and you'll get a lot more recommendations.
Well, thank you, Gary. Once again, the book is Political Warfare, Strategies for Combating China's Plan to Win Without Fighting. The link is below. Carrie, thank you again for joining us. This has been horrifying.
Well, again, there's some good news here. We recognize the problem, and we're starting to fight back. We're starting to get organized and push back. I couldn't have said that 2 years ago. So, Chris, thank you. Shelley, thank you. And Matt, thank you.
Definitely. And hopefully we can see you in person one of these days after lockdowns are done.
We will. It's all going to get better. There's light out there. There's sunshine. We're going to get there.
Good to hear. All right. Take care of yourself.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that definitely was grim, but I liked how he ended it on a message of hope.
Yeah, like I hope my Chinese bonds give me good returns.
Oh, Matt.
I think we know who's been co-opted by political warfare.
Why didn't they reach out to me? I'm very easy to sell out.
I know. It really would have made more sense since you're the face of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
seriously.
but then they use me to subvert you slowly so you don't even realize
Oh my God, he's telling us what he's going to do, just like the CCP.
But the premise of that is that I would listen to Matt.
Oh, wait. That's also true.
It falls apart. There's a reason it's not Matt in my ear every episode. What's that? What's that, Matt?
Yeah. What would it be like if it was Matt in your ear?
Socialism with Chinese characters. Xi Jinping thought with Chinese characteristic.
It's also socialism with Chinese characters.
Is
There's
it?
a lot of things that have Chinese characteristics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the 3 warfares, the 10 good luck fights.
Kerry Gershaneck's book, there's like a propaganda posters on each chapter head, and there was one where it was Mao standing, and then behind him they're kind of like these profile images of Lenin, Stalin, then Engels and Marx.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like it's socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's like, here are all the, old white European guys, and now it's Mao.
Yay.
Yeah.
It really is a fantastic book. I definitely recommend you check it out. And it is free. This is a public service. Is that the way to say it? He's doing another great service to the people of the world and American. Like, you should read this book and get educated.
Yeah, we'll put a link to the PDF below. You can also request a free hardcover copy, and we'll put that information.
Yeah, it's an email. I'll also post links to the book on, the social media platforms, the China Uncensored Facebook page, Twitter. I don't know how it would work on Instagram since links don't really work on Instagram, but just get the book. Get the book. Do yourself a favor.
You don't have a link in your bio on Instagram?
I think it just goes to the channel.
Okay, I'll help you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And yeah, with that, thanks for watching China Unscripted. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Gnezda.
We'll talk to you next time.